On the day our biological child was buried, my husband ran off to Thailand to hold a birthday party for his mistress. At the same time, my mother-in-law emptied out all of my property and even threatened to ruin my reputation. When I was about to take a knife and go on a suicidal spree with everyone, a truck came rushing towards me. Time seemed to stand still, and suddenly a large screen appeared in front of me, quickly replaying all the memories of my first half of life like a movie. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn. I was holding the urn of our child's ashes in my arms. The moment the truck hit me, the ashes in the box were scattered into the air. I desperately tried to grab them with my hands, but caught nothing. My body hit the ground heavily, and the pain of my broken bones contorted my face. In my mind was the voice of the judge: insufficient evidence. The defendant Henry is not guilty. In order to have a happy date with his mistress, Henry first taped our child's mouth shut and then left him in the park. When the child was found, the icy river water was wrapped around his body, and his tiny stomach was filled with river water. I don't understand. Even a tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. How could Henry stoop so low? I desperately bit and tore at Henry, demanding of him, why? Henry shook me off and irritably tugged at his tie. Damn it, you gave birth to an autistic kid. Ask me why? If he were a normal kid, could he have walked to the riverbank and fallen in by himself? He's just a lunatic. His tone was extremely cold. I slapped him. Apart from the word beast, I couldn't find any other words to describe Henry. On the day our child was buried, he ran off to Thailand to hold a birthday party for his mistress. I scrolled through his mistress's WeChat moments and saw a photo of several Thai models surrounding her with bouquets of flowers in their hands, sending her blessings. For the first time in my life, my hands were shaking so badly that I grabbed a few tranquilizers and swallowed them whole with water. Before the court hearing, I was losing handfuls of hair. I could only fall asleep with sleeping pills all night long. Looking in the mirror, I was as haggard as a ghost, not looking human at all. On the day of the court hearing, I deliberately put a fruit knife in my bag. I had made up my mind that if the law couldn't punish him, then I would do it myself. Lying in a pool of blood, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Henry walking towards me. I wanted to tell him to get lost, but when I opened my mouth, a big mouthful of blood gushed out. Then, time seemed to stand still again. Suddenly a large screen appeared in front of me, quickly playing the memories of my first half of life like a movie, and then it came to an abrupt stop. It was as if someone had pressed the power off button. Go to hell. I blurted out these two words, and when I opened my eyes, I found myself lying in the obstetrics ward of a hospital. The calendar and clock on the wall showed that it was March 4th, 2021, 12:05. The baby in my womb had been found to have problems since the prenatal checkup. The doctor had asked me several times whether I wanted to keep it or not. I had looked up a lot of information, and most people advised me to have an abortion. But Henry took the ultrasound report and told me, "Look, Diana, he's a little life. He's overcome so many difficulties and is living well in your womb. Are you really willing to let him leave this world?" Henry repeatedly told me, "No matter what problems the baby has when he's born, I'll face them with you. Believe me, I'll take good care of you and the baby. Besides, what if he's a healthy baby?" Henry was a heavy smoker. It was not easy for me to conceive this baby. He didn't want me to have an abortion, even though he knew the baby might have problems. I yanked out the needle that was attached to the drip in my hand. I sat up from the hospital bed. Raising my swollen hands from the drip, I covered my eyes and burst into tears. I called the doctor and said, "I want to be discharged." The first thing I did after being discharged was to go and find William. I stood at his door and waited for him for 2 hours. The moment he saw me, he frowned. "You look so pale. Didn't I tell you to wait for me in a coffee shop?" I shook my head and asked him, "I have a case I want to talk to you about." "What case?" "A divorce case." "Huh?" His brows furrowed even tighter, and then he carefully examined me. "Are you kidding?" I forced a smile. "Now there's something more important that I want you to help me with. In your code of conduct as a lawyer, is it okay to accompany a client to have an abortion?" William, Henry, and I were university classmates, and William had a good relationship with Henry. But since I married Henry, I had always deliberately avoided having too much interaction with William. Except for holidays and festivals, I had no contact with him. In my previous life, he had gone abroad to work on a project very early. I heard that the project was very important, and after he went abroad, I had even less communication with him. Back at the hospital again. The smell of disinfectant in the air and the fully cranked up air conditioning made me uncomfortable. William asked me, "Diana, are you sure?" I nodded. He went to handle the discharge procedures for me. When the doctor pushed me into the abortion room, my teeth were chattering. The doctor asked me to curl up like a shrimp, and the anesthetic was injected into my body. During the waiting period, I saw the image of the baby on the instrument screen. At that moment, I burst into tears. He was a child who liked painting very much, liked to be alone in his little world. Most of the time he was quiet. I don't know why Henry would think he was noisy and tape his mouth shut. I can't experience the pain he felt when he drowned. I don't know if he was calling for mom when he was struggling in the cold river water. If I could, I would like to take his place. Besides autism, he also had a heart defect. He couldn't exercise or play normally like other children. Bringing him into this world, I couldn't give him a healthy body, but let him experience the greatest malice in the world. Sorry, mom isn't a qualified mom. When the doctor pushed me out, I was extremely weak. William came over to look at me. He reached out to touch my forehead, but halfway through, he withdrew his hand. His cell phone had been vibrating continuously. I asked him, "Why don't you answer the phone?" William said, "There's a project abroad. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of energy. I already declined it, but they keep calling me. Don't worry about it." I looked into William's deep eyes and my lips quivered slightly as I said, "Thank you." William replied, "You're welcome. It's my duty to meet the client's needs." I didn't want to stay in the hospital any longer. So I went to William's place. On the way, I accidentally caught a glimpse of the search history on his phone. Can abortion cause death? How many days of rest are appropriate after an abortion? How much harm does abortion do to a woman? What is good to eat to recover after an abortion? He was driving and asked, "Has Henry contacted you?" I answered, I sent him a message saying that I went on a trip to relax. In my previous life, I was so sensible. I was so sensible that even when I went to the hospital to maintain my pregnancy, I said I was going on a trip to relax. Henry was in a period of career advancement at that time, and I didn't want the baby's situation to distract him. Now when I think about it, I just find it ridiculous. William didn't ask any more questions. He turned up the heating in the car to a high level. I was so exhausted that I fell asleep soon. When I woke up again, I was already lying on the bed in William's apartment. The black and white decorative style of William's apartment was rather cold and lonely. Lying on the bed, I heard William talking on the phone with someone outside. "Find an aunt who can make soup. Well, there's a patient who needs to be taken care of." After listening for a while, I fell asleep again. The next day when I woke up, I smelled a burnt smell. Soon William pushed the door open and brought a pot of something that I didn't know what it was to me. His whole face was full of annoyance. I followed the recipe exactly, but I don't know what went wrong. "If you don't want to eat it, I'll just pour it all out. The aunt will come this afternoon and ask her to make something edible for you." Looking at his annoyed face, I asked him, "When did you find the aunt?" "I found her before. I'm not used to eating food from outside." William was always like this. He was clearly concerned about others, but he was stubborn and refused to admit it. I gave a light hum and didn't expose him. In the afternoon, the aunt came. William told the aunt a lot of things behind my back. Until William went to the company, the aunt said to me, "Your boyfriend is so nice to you. He told me not to do this and not to do that. I've never seen such a meticulous person." I paused and said, "He's not my boyfriend." I stayed in the apartment for nearly half a month. When I felt that my body had recovered almost, I wanted to leave. William didn't try to keep me. "Are you sure?" I nodded, "Yes. I've sent you the agreement you wanted." If you have any problems, just call me directly. I left the apartment and returned to the Henry family. I was already thin, and I didn't show much during pregnancy either, so my mother-in-law didn't notice that the baby was gone. Seeing me back, she came up to me and said, "Diana, where did you go on your trip? Did you buy me a present?" No. She was a bit disappointed. "You used to buy me presents whenever you went out. Why did you forget this time?" I said, "I didn't want to buy." She gave an "oh," and didn't care too much. Then she said, "Diana, Mom is a bit short of money recently. Could you lend Mom some money?" My mother-in-law was a brother-sucker. She didn't dare to ask Henry for money. Since I married Henry, she had been asking me for money. I ran a design studio. I didn't earn much money, but it was enough for my own living. My mother-in-law would always find various reasons to borrow money from me, claiming that it was for seeing a doctor, but actually she used it to subsidize her younger brother. I looked at my mother-in-law and asked, "The reason?" She was stunned for a moment and then quickly said, "I've been having some pain in my legs recently. I saw a massage device that I liked, but it's a bit expensive, costing 10,000 yuan. Diana, Mother's Day is coming soon. Could you just consider it as a Mother's Day gift for Mom?" She called herself Mom so affectionately, but it sounded extremely harsh to me. Because I lost my mother when I was young, after marrying into the Henry family, I treated my mother-in-law as my own mother, but she was never satisfied and used various reasons to suck my blood. I gave a light hum and handed her a credit card. "There's no limit. Spend as you like. The password is 3 6s and 3 8s. Spend as much as you want. Since Mother's Day is coming soon, buy everything you want." When my mother-in-law saw the bank card I handed her, her face lit up with a big smile. "Diana is really a sensible and good daughter-in-law. Mom didn't love you in vain. What would you like to eat? Mom will cook it for you. Just stew a pig's trotter for me." It took a long time to stew the pig's trotter. Henry said he had to work overtime in the evening. I carried the pig's trotter and went to find him. He had just been promoted to vice president in the company, a high position. Moreover, he was very popular with young girls. His mistress was a receptionist in his company, 22 years old, named Elizabeth, and she was really sweet looking. The two of them were still in the ambiguous stage at this time and didn't dare to be blatant. It wasn't until after I gave birth to the baby and the baby was diagnosed with autism that they really got together. I came at a good time. When I showed up with the pig's trotter, Elizabeth was sharing the same bowl of seafood porridge with Henry using the same spoon. Elizabeth was the first to notice me. "Sister Diana." Henry was so scared that the spoon in his hand dropped to the ground directly. He looked up at me and said, "Diana, why are you here?" "To bring you dinner. Don't you like the pig's trotter stewed by Mom the most?" I placed the insulated lunchbox in my hand on his desk and glanced at the seafood porridge in front of him. "I'm afraid I came at an unlucky time. You should be full from this seafood porridge, right?" "Not full." Henry quickly took the insulated lunchbox and then winked at Elizabeth. Elizabeth left tactfully. There were only Henry and I left in the office. He poured all the seafood porridge into the trash can. "The porridge from the restaurant is not as good as the pig's trotter stewed by Mom. What's more, you brought it to me yourself." He carefully helped me sit down in front of his desk and said, "You're still pregnant. Just stay at home obediently. Don't run around. If you get tired and hurt the baby in your belly, I'll be a sinner for all eternity. Mom will kill me." He made a gesture of slitting his throat. I was silent, looking at Henry at this moment. He was like a clown. He felt uncomfortable all over being stared at by me. "Honey, why are you looking at me like that?" I said to Henry. "Henry, when we got married, didn't you promise me that you would be good to me for a lifetime and never betray me?" Henry coughed awkwardly. "Yes." "Then let's sign an agreement." I took out the marital loyalty agreement and placed it neatly in front of Henry. Henry casually glanced at the seafood porridge he had poured into the trash can. "Don't overthink it. Elizabeth just ordered an extra takeout, and there wasn't an extra spoon, so..." I just covered my stomach and looked at him in silence. Henry let out a helpless sigh. "Sure, I'll sign it. Anyway, you're the precious one in our whole family now. You can do whatever you want. As long as you give birth to this baby safely, nothing else matters. He took out a pen and with a big flourish, signed his name on the marital loyalty agreement. Seeing Henry sign his name, I changed my posture, propped my chin up and looked at him. I remember her name is Elizabeth, right? Henry gave a light hum. She's quite pretty. Henry said, no matter how pretty she is, she's not as pretty as you. My wife is the most beautiful in the whole world. Looking at his ingratiating face, I felt nauseous. I said, isn't her English quite good? Would she be interested in being my tutor on weekends? I want to learn English. Henry paused. You'll have to ask Elizabeth. I can't make that decision. In my previous life, it was Henry who took the initiative to invite her to come to our home to tutor me. However, it wasn't English she tutored me in, but how to take care of an autistic child. I heard that Elizabeth also had an autistic relative, so she was quite experienced. When she heard that I wanted to learn English, Elizabeth agreed without hesitation. Sister Diana, when shall we start? Let's start this week. When I got home, I printed out a copy and sent it to William. William sent me a message asking me to collect information about Henry's property. Henry had bought quite a lot of stocks and funds over the years. Besides the house we were living in now, he also had other properties elsewhere. He had concealed a lot from me, much more than I had imagined. I bought many cameras online and hid them in concealed places. I also bought a travel ticket for my mother-in-law. On the weekend, Elizabeth came. There were only Henry and I at home. I asked Henry to wash some fruits for Elizabeth. Elizabeth took the fruits handed by Henry and said, "Thank you, President Henry." Don't call me President Henry when it's not working hours. Just call me Henry. Elizabeth's ears turned a bit red as she nodded. My intention wasn't really for the tutoring. After sitting for a while, I said, my back hurts. I'll go to the balcony to get some fresh air. Henry said, honey, Mom's not at home. I'll stew a fish for you at noon. Elizabeth looked at Henry. Wow, I didn't expect President Henry could cook. Henry was not satisfied. Call me Henry. Elizabeth blushed and turned her gaze to me. I'm so envious of Sister Diana. If only I had a husband who could cook. At lunch, Elizabeth was a bit restrained and got a fish bone stuck in her throat. Henry quickly stood up to pat Elizabeth's back and handed her some water. I watched Henry running around busily and laughed. Henry probably realized something and quickly stopped. I said, how could you get a fish bone stuck in your throat at such a young age? Elizabeth stroked her neck. I'm sorry, Sister Diana. I made a fool of myself in front of you. I don't know how to eat fish. Someone else used to peel the fish for me before. Oh, then let Henry peel it for you. Elizabeth waved her hands repeatedly. No, Sister Diana. Why not? In my previous life, whenever Elizabeth ate fish or shrimp, she always asked Henry to peel them for her. She wouldn't even pick up food herself. Later, she even recorded a video and deliberately sent it to me. With the caption, Diana, Brother Henry won't peel fish and shrimp for you, but he will for me. I replied like this at that time, Henry is really something for peeling fish and shrimp for an armless disabled person. I'm so touched. But no matter how good my reply was, I knew very well in my heart that I had lost. Completely lost. Coming back to my senses, Henry was also looking at me with a speechless expression. In the evening, Henry put his arm around my shoulder and said to me, honey, if you want to learn English, I'll find someone else to tutor you. With Elizabeth here, I feel really uncomfortable. Why? I don't know. I just feel really uncomfortable. Do you think it could be because your husband is so handsome that Elizabeth has feelings for me? I smelled the cigarette smoke on him and frowned hard. What about you? Henry rubbed against my shoulder. Me? I only love my wife. No other woman is as good as my wife. But honey, your husband is really a heartthrob. Honey, you have such good taste to pick me as your husband. I always felt that I was going to be sick from his greasy words. Pushing him away, I said, you smell strongly of cigarette smoke. Henry remembered something. Yes, yes, yes. You're pregnant now and can't smell cigarette smoke. Look at my memory. I'll go take a bath. My mother-in-law was having a great time traveling in another place. I recommended a software to her. Your brother is short of money, right? This software has a very powerful function. You can do tasks to earn commissions. With compound interest, it can multiply 10 times. My friend is doing it and has earned a lot of money. Or you can do it with your brother. Then your brother can not only earn money to buy a house and a car for his son, but you won't have to borrow money from me anymore in the future. My mother-in-law was skeptical. I sent her the operation method and said, do a task worth 20 yuan first and see if you can get a cashback. My mother-in-law did a task and got a cashback of 40 yuan. She happily sent me a message, Diana, this software is really good. I've earned dozens of yuan now. I said, then just keep doing it. Looking at the increasing reminder messages of the credit card being swiped, I curled the corners of my mouth slightly. On the fourth Sunday, Elizabeth came to tutor me again. This time I wasn't at home. I sent her a WeChat message, I'm outside. Wait for me at home first. I'll be back soon. I opened the mobile phone surveillance. At first, Elizabeth was waiting for me obediently at home. Then Henry came out to cut fruits for her, and the two of them then went into the kitchen. Elizabeth wanted to help Henry cut fruits but accidentally cut her hand. Henry helped her put on a band-aid, and the two of them naturally bumped into each other. In the surveillance, it was obvious that Elizabeth was nervous. Henry was quite natural. He even tickled Elizabeth's palm with his long finger. Elizabeth shyly took a step back. Henry said something, then raised his hand to brush Elizabeth's hair, then, Henry grabbed Elizabeth's chin and lowered his head to kiss her. The two of them kissed for a long time. Since I was pregnant and Henry couldn't touch me, he had been longing for it for a long time. This kiss was like a fuse, igniting all of Henry's desires. Watching the two of them on the surveillance, I curled the corners of my mouth again. Really good. Everything was going according to plan. I got back home. Elizabeth's face was flushed, and there was a bit more perfume smell in the air. Henry had used my perfume to cover up everything for fear that I would notice something. You're finally back, honey. I've been waiting for you for so long. I went to buy something, then you have your English tutoring, honey. I'm a bit sleepy. I'll go to bed and have a sleep, okay? Henry went back to the room. I looked at Elizabeth's flushed face and said to her, Elizabeth, asking you to come and tutor me in English on Saturdays and Sundays, won't it tire you out? Elizabeth shook her head. No, Sister Diana. How could tutoring English be tiring? Henry will even cut fruits for me. You and Henry are both so nice to me. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. I bought a fake pregnancy belly online and reasonably asked Henry to sleep in a separate bed from me because his snoring disturbed my sleep. Henry agreed. In the past nearly half a month, he and Elizabeth had been having a great time without restraint. And sometimes when I went to the balcony to get some fresh air, they could even get up to something when going to the toilet one after the other. They were blatant, thinking that I wouldn't notice. On the other side, my mother-in-law came back from her trip. According to her nature, she liked to wander around everywhere. Coming back so early, there must be a reason. As soon as she got home, she grabbed me and said, Diana, that software doesn't work anymore. At first, when I invested 100 or 200 yuan, it gave me a cashback of several hundred yuan. Later, when I invested 100,000 or 200,000 yuan, why didn't it give me any cashback anymore? I said, why don't you try again? I did. She was so anxious and angry. My brother tried too. He invested 200,000 yuan, and it's all gone. We can't get it back. I asked, what's going on? My mother-in-law grabbed my hand. Diana, I don't care. You have to get the money back for me. You recommended that software to me. You're responsible. I nodded. Well, if nothing else works, let's call the police. My mother-in-law thought for a long time. Call the police? We have to call the police. I took her to the police station. After explaining the situation, my mother-in-law was crying and shouting that she must get the money back. I stood by and watched her coldly until her eyes were red and swollen from crying. After leaving the police station, she said to me, "Diana, how did your friend recommend this to you? This thing is just harmful." I said, "You're right. Diana, what should I do now? If my son finds out, he'll be really angry." "Then don't let him know." "Yes, don't let him know." "Diana, could you lend me some more money? Isn't the credit card enough?" "No, it's not enough. My brother's son, that is, your cousin, is getting married. Look, could you lend me a bit more?" "Sure, but you have to write an IOU this time, not just this time's debt." I was going to add up all the money she owed me before. My mother-in-law was the kind of person who never cared about such things. She always thought that since I was her daughter-in-law, my money was hers, so she casually signed her name. Finally, Henry noticed. One of his credit cards had been maliciously overdrawn. This card was bound to an old mobile phone number of Henry's. I had temporarily taken it over and used it, and never returned it to him. All of his bank accounts were frozen, and he couldn't buy a necklace for Elizabeth when he wanted to. Henry came to me and asked, "Diana, did you use my card?" I was looking at the design drawing that was about to be submitted to the client. "It wasn't me. It was your mom." Henry was furious. "You knew Mom liked to spend money recklessly, and you still gave her the credit card to use?" I turned to look at Henry. "Your mom asked me for money. As a daughter-in-law, of course I should give it to her. But you shouldn't have given her the credit card. Over the years, she has asked me for a lot of money. If I didn't give her the credit card, should I use the money earned by my design studio to subsidize her?" Henry was speechless. He said seriously, "Diana, never do this again." I didn't answer. An hour after talking to me, Henry went to see William. And after talking to Henry, William came to see me. In the coffee shop, William's brows were deeply furrowed. He said to me, "Henry said there was a case in his company that he wanted me to take on. And then?" Before leaving, he told me that a friend of his wanted to get divorced and asked how to divide the property to be more favorable to his friend. Also, his friend's wife was pregnant, and his friend still wanted to fight for custody. I burst out laughing. In my previous life, when the baby was just born, he pretended to be a very responsible father. But when the baby was diagnosed with autism, every time he looked at the baby, it was as if he was looking at an enemy. At that time, if the law allowed, Henry could have strangled the baby immediately. I said to William, "I don't want to wait any longer." William handed me a marital property agreement. "Is her name Elizabeth? Keep all the chat messages between Henry and Elizabeth, and save the vouchers for all the gifts he gave to Elizabeth." I took the marital property agreement he handed me and thanked William. William stood up and said, "Before this case goes through the formal procedure, it's not appropriate for me and you to meet again." I nodded. He was about to leave. Thinking of something, I took out the key from my pocket and handed it to him. "The key to your apartment. You gave it to me last time, and I forgot to return it to you. The lock at home has been changed. It's no use returning it to me." William said that he turned around and left on his own. Looking at his back, I seemed to be transported back to my university days. Henry was outgoing, while William was reserved. They were two people with completely different personalities. William never showed concern for me in words or took the initiative to do something for me, while Henry was much more proactive, asking about my well-being, sending flowers and bringing meals. On the day of university graduation, Henry was drunk and confessed his love to me on the spur of the moment, and the people around joined in the fun. I looked at William. His eyes were calm, and his face was serene. I made an excuse to go to the bathroom, and when I came out, I bumped into him. I asked him, "Don't you have anything you want to say to me?" William looked into my eyes, which were as deep as an abyss, with an unfathomable hidden meaning. He said, "No." For some reason, the corners of my eyes felt sour. I replied, "Okay." When I went back to the private room, I agreed to be Henry's girlfriend. I don't remember when exactly it was. Only later did someone tell me, "William actually liked you too. But he's not good with words and often says the opposite of what he means. You know, when he's not sure that he can bring happiness to someone, he won't make a promise easily. His family background wasn't good, and he had a tough life. The reason he didn't confess his feelings to you earlier was probably that he wanted to work hard until he could give you happiness. At that time, I didn't feel much after hearing that because I was in the throes of passion with Henry. Now that I think about it, it really makes my eyes feel sour. William, already a top figure in his professional field, is still single. Henry once laughed at him, with your current status, you could have any woman you want. William replied simply, I'm not interested. Watching William's figure disappear from the coffee shop, I was flooded with mixed emotions. The next day, I presented the marital property agreement to Henry. Henry glanced at it and said, What's up, honey? I said, Nothing much. It's just that I've seen a lot of divorce news recently, and it made me feel uneasy. Henry said, Honey, you're overthinking it. Even if everyone else gets divorced, I won't divorce you. Don't you know what kind of person I am? After being married for these years, don't you know my character? I reached out and touched my stomach. Are you really not going to sign it? Henry said, Honey, it's not that I don't want to sign. It's just that you suddenly sprang this on me, and I'm a bit confused. Henry, I stared at him. A few days ago, the doctor called me again to ask me to get some medicine to maintain my pregnancy. If you don't want to sign, then I'll have to reconsider the matter of maintaining the pregnancy too. You know, I was already hesitating about whether to keep this child or not. Henry interrupted me, looking quite serious. Didn't we already agree to keep this child? I'm already in my mid-30s. It's not easy for me to have an heir. I asked, So, will you sign? His gaze suddenly became sharp. Honey, do you really want me to sign that badly? Yes. Henry raised his eyebrows, picked up the pen, and signed his name on the agreement. Then, without saying a word, he turned around and slammed the bedroom door shut. When Elizabeth came to tutor me again on the weekend, I made an excuse to go downstairs to buy some fruits. I overheard their conversation. My wife might have noticed something. She's been really off lately, Henry said as he played with Elizabeth's fingers. Elizabeth was surprised. What should we do? It's okay, Henry said. She can't do anything to me. If it weren't for the baby in her belly, I would have kicked her aside long ago. Elizabeth whispered, I can also give you a baby. Yes, I've been with you every time. Why haven't you gotten pregnant yet? Why don't we go to the hospital and have a look? Henry hated the word hospital the most. No way. A bunch of quacks. I just smoked too much. There's nothing else wrong with me. Henry didn't go to ask William. Instead, he contacted a lawyer friend of William's. The legal circle isn't that big, so the word naturally reached William's ears. William told me, Henry wants to transfer the marital property. I realized it too. Henry didn't have many relatives. Except for the house we're currently living in, he converted all his property into real estate and some other easily liquidated items and transferred them to my mother-in-law's name. My mother-in-law isn't a very shrewd person. She's been running to the police station every day recently, or pestering me to borrow more money from me. She said to me, Diana, you've really screwed Mom over. The hundreds of thousands of yuan of me and my brothers, we still can't get it back. If you don't help Mom out, Mom won't be able to live. I said, Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I'll help you. My mother-in-law asked me, then what should we do next? Can you come up with an idea? The son of my mother-in-law's brother is quite short and not a very nice person. It's a great blessing for him to find a girlfriend. The girl's family is asking for a dowry of 500,000 yuan. This is a considerable amount for many families. My mother-in-law's brother has been complaining to her all day long, and she's really worried. I said, Mom, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I really don't have any money left. How about this? Henry gave you some things recently. You can take them to the bank to mortgage. That won't work. My son will scold me to death if he finds out. No, he won't. When the money from my design studio is available again, I'll make it up for you. Diana is really a good daughter-in-law, always thinking about Mom. But Mom, you still need to write an IOU for this. I said. It's just for accounting purposes, so that it won't be inconsistent when checked. We're all family, and we won't force you to pay it back right away. After your nephew from your eldest brother's family gets married, let him pay me back slowly. Okay, okay, okay. Diana is still the best. Not like my stinky son. In my previous life, before Henry wanted to divorce me, he gave my mother-in-law a lot of ideas to try every means to empty out my property. In this life, before Henry and I had a falling out, he hadn't told my mother-in-law about these things yet. My mother-in-law is a gossip. He was afraid that if I found out, I wouldn't want to keep the baby. Henry's company organized a team-building trip to Thailand. I suggested to Henry, I want to go too. Henry didn't intend to agree at first, but after I kept insisting strongly, he finally agreed. He said, "Honey, look, you've been thinking too much lately. I'm just going on a team-building trip to Thailand, not doing anything else." I said, "I'm not overthinking. I just want to take this opportunity of the team-building trip to travel to Thailand with you." The day before we left for Thailand, I sent a message to William. He only replied with one word, "Okay." Sunshine, beaches, a foreign country. Everyone was having a great time. I deliberately got Henry drunk and unlocked all the chat records on his phone. Those blatant and disgusting words between him and Elizabeth came into my view. Henry called Elizabeth, baby. He sent her some pictures with captions like, "Was hubby great yesterday? Baby, would you wear this and show it to hubby? Baby, you're so good. That stinky woman at home is so annoying. Baby, when I dump that stinky woman, will you marry me? Baby, you're so sweet." The chat records were all recent. He had deleted the previous ones, probably because he was afraid that I would find out. Moreover, his phone could only be unlocked with his own fingerprint. It was obvious that he had a strong sense of precaution. I took pictures to save the chat records between the two of them and then put his phone back in its original place. I remember that on the day my child was buried, Henry held a birthday party for Elizabeth in a Thai restaurant. Coincidentally, we were also in Thailand now. Well, let Elizabeth experience the feeling of being surrounded by Thai models again. Near the end of the trip, I suggested that I would go to a Thai model-themed restaurant with Elizabeth to check in. Elizabeth was eager to try it. Henry wanted to follow, but I said, "You can't go. This is a day for us women." Henry gasped. "Aren't I better looking than those Thai models? Honey, don't you think I'm enough for you to look at?" I wasn't sure whether he was saying this to me or to Elizabeth. I said, "Not enough. Since I married you, I haven't had my own space. I'm just going to check in at a place. It won't cost me anything." Elizabeth, Henry was helpless. "Fine, go ahead then." Elizabeth and I went to the Thai model-themed restaurant. Surrounded by handsome men and with a beautiful view, Elizabeth was as happy as could be. I called over the Thai models and told them to take good care of Elizabeth. Then, looking at her bag that she had left somewhere in the corner with her phone in it, I turned around and left. I was walking on the streets of a foreign country. Suddenly, it started to drizzle for no reason. The moment I looked up, there was an umbrella above my head. Looking up further, it was William. I said, "What a coincidence." He said, "There's a case for a client that I needed to fly here to handle." "Then why are you here?" "As you said, it's just a coincidence." William took me to a seaside bar, the kind where you could watch the sunset. The afterglow of the setting sun was pouring down. William and I sat there quietly, without saying a word. After a long while, I turned my gaze to William and said, "Do you know that for a while, I asked myself countless times why I married Henry, why I didn't see his true face beneath the disguise. I regretted it so much that I almost wanted to slap myself a few times." William said, "A skilled hunter won't tell you he's a hunter before approaching his prey." I slowly turned my gaze to the sea glowing with the afterglow. Henry and Elizabeth are really a perfect match of scumbags. Back at the hotel, Henry told me that Elizabeth was missing. I said, "Did you call the police?" Henry said, "You went to the Thai model-themed restaurant with her. Why did you come back alone?" I said, "I had something to do, so I left early." Henry grabbed my arm, his irritable face carrying a hint of violence. Diana, if anything happens to Elizabeth, you'll be held responsible. Elizabeth was found. In the hospital, she was shaking violently. Henry immediately pulled her into his arms, ignoring the looks of me and his colleagues around. He held Elizabeth and said, "Honey, don't be afraid. I'm here." Elizabeth was crying bitterly and telling Henry about her experience. So many men surrounded me, offered me drinks, fed me food. They asked me for money. I gave them tips, but they weren't satisfied and kept asking me for more money. I was so scared and wanted to leave, but they took me to a small, dark room. Several men stripped naked and surrounded me. I wanted to resist, but they were so strong. At this point, Elizabeth couldn't continue. She just hugged Henry and cried, "I'm not clean anymore, Henry. I'm not clean. I had no money. I really had no money. I couldn't find my phone. I didn't know who to call. I managed to run out somehow. Woo-woo, Henry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not clean." Henry patted Elizabeth's shoulder to comfort her and then turned to stare at me coldly. I calmly said to the two of them, "You two have been together behind my back for a long time, right?" Elizabeth's body trembled. Realizing something, she quickly pushed Henry away. And Henry just sneered, "Diana, I really didn't expect that you're quite a good actress." I said, "Thanks to you." After the confrontation, we returned to China. I sued Henry. Only then did Henry realize that he had been led by me into the trap that I had set up long ago. He immediately went to find my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law was confused. "Son, what are you talking about? Everything was fine. Why do you want to divorce Diana?" Henry didn't have the time to explain to her. He just asked, "What have you and Diana been doing recently?" My mother-in-law hemmed and hawed, not intending to say. Under Henry's interrogation, she blurted out everything. Diana recommended a software to me, saying that it could make money. I started by investing a few $100 and did earn quite a bit of interest back. But later, when I invested tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of yuan, not only did I not get any more interest, but I also couldn't get my money back. The money I spent on swiping your credit cards was all invested in that software. However, it's not Diana's fault. She was cheated by her friend. Diana also told me that she would take full responsibility. Recently, your cousin from your eldest uncle's family is getting married and needs to buy a house. Some of the properties and jewelry that you transferred to my name before, I mortgaged some of them. Your eldest uncle really has no money. I couldn't come up with the money at the moment, so I came up with this idea. But Diana said that when her funds are available, she'll make it up to me. Henry was almost furious. He asked her, "How many more things don't I know about?" My mother-in-law shrank her neck. "Son, you're not still angry about the credit cards, are you?" Diana told me to use those credit cards freely. I also went to the police to report the money I was cheated out of. And, enough, Henry said. "What else did Diana ask you to do?" "Nothing much. She just asked me to write some IOUs, saying that I borrowed money from her and asked me to write IOUs for her. Also, after I mortgaged the properties and jewelry that you transferred to my name, since Diana repeatedly promised to help me make up for it, I also wrote an IOU to her in advance." Henry was on the verge of exploding. My mother-in-law saw that Henry's face was looking more and more wrong and slapped her thigh. "But I mortgaged all your properties. Diana hasn't made up the money for me yet. What if you can't get those houses back?" Henry sneered repeatedly. "Mom, you're really a great mom. You used your son's money to subsidize your brother's family. You don't even know when you're being tricked. You're the best mom in the world." The divorce case was heard in court. When Henry walked in and saw William sitting next to me, he was clearly taken aback. He said to me, "Diana, you've really given me a huge surprise." I said, "Don't rush. There are more surprises to come." Even though Henry hired the best lawyers, I had more faith in William. In the courtroom, I placed the surveillance footage in front of everyone, playing the affectionate scenes between Henry and Elizabeth frame by frame in slow motion. Those lingering moments, those whispered words. Even clearer than movie scenes. I also took out the marital loyalty agreement. Henry's face turned ugly. Henry's lawyer questioned my motives, suspecting that I deliberately created alone time for Elizabeth and Henry under the pretext of English tutoring to lure Henry into my trap. William simply asked in return, "Is it Henry in the video? Is it Henry who had an extramarital affair? Is it Henry who violated the marital loyalty agreement?" The other side was left speechless. I then promptly played out the chat records between Henry and Elizabeth. Oh, and also the evidence of Henry's attempt to transfer marital property. Henry was so angry that he banged on the table and stood up. "Diana, you've been plotting against me all along, haven't you? You're really ruthless. You set the trap for me step by step, making me walk right into it. I always thought you knew nothing. I didn't expect that you had planned all this and were waiting for me here." I laughed. "You thought I was stupid, right? Henry, actually, I was pretty stupid. Stupid enough to fall for a scumbag like you with a beastly heart, to be blinded by you and marry you." The evidence was conclusive. Henry lost completely. Of course, this wasn't the end. I took out the IOUs that my mother-in-law had written to me. "See this, Henry? This is the money your mother owes me. It doesn't amount to much, just a few million. Remember to pay me back the money your mother owes me on her behalf. Also, I don't care who those transferred properties of yours are mortgaged to now. Remember, that's our joint marital property, and I'm entitled to half of it." Henry couldn't stay calm. He rushed over from the courtroom to hit me. William stepped in front of me. He grabbed Henry's wrist and stared coldly at him. "Do you want to go to jail?" Henry stared at William angrily. "You're in cahoots with Diana. I thought you had given up on Diana long ago. I didn't expect that you still like her. Even a bootlicker isn't as obsequious as you. William, Diana is a used woman by me, and you still want her. You really don't mind, do you?" I thought William would get angry. Unexpectedly, he remained calm and composed, looking at Henry, who looked like a clown, with a gaze as if he were looking at an impotently furious dog. "Henry, only an incompetent man would judge a woman by her chastity." Henry's eyes were bloodshot. The trial ended. I called out to Henry and said to him, "Do you know what the even bigger surprise is?" He stared at me fixedly. I pulled out the fake pregnant belly from under my dress and said to him, "Look, it's fake." Henry went completely crazy. "Diana, you actually aborted my child. Diana, how dare you? How dare you?" He looked terrifying. William shielded me behind him. I said, "He was a mistake." Henry laughed like a madman. "Diana, you're good. You're really good. You've been lying to me for so long. Ha 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 ha. You really want to ruin me completely." He rushed towards me again. William restrained him. He cursed me through William. "Bitch, you deserve to die. You killed my child. I should kill you. Is that so?" I looked at his enraged face, thinking of how my child looked when he was fished out of the cold river water. It was he who truly killed the baby. The property division was completed. I got everything I deserved. My mother-in-law called me a beast, accusing me of deceiving her and going crazy everywhere. I remained unmoved. Henry was heavily in debt overnight. And because of his conduct issues, after a board meeting at the company, he was dismissed from his job. He had nothing left, and naturally, Elizabeth left him too. On my side, to prevent my mother-in-law and Henry from finding me, I changed both my design studio and the apartment I lived in. I moved to William's neighborhood. When I was carrying a bunch of things and walking into the elevator, I bumped into William. He silently took the things from my hands. I recalled the words I said to him on the day of university graduation. I asked him again, "Don't you have anything you want to say to me?" He paused. "I didn't change the lock at my place. That key of yours can still open the door to my house." "And what else?" After a long silence, he raised his head to look at me, his deep eyes full of sincerity. "Diana, would you like to have a relationship with me?"